Madam President, an outstanding amount of increases. And for the purpose of this debate, of course, members don't want to face the facts. But Madam President, the increases that households have faced in the electricity bill is extremely high. There's no question about that. Gas prices went up. Electricity bill is not going to go up. Fuel prices have been up. In where? Yeah. So page 14 in the Social and Economic Review. It's there. So if you have your copy, Madam President, I can take you through it.
Just read this section, yes.
It says that although there were broad-based upward movements, price increases faced by consumers were particularly large for electricity, which rose by 30.3% in 2022, to a lesser extent for fuel and food and transport. It's there, page 14. I wanna encourage the members to get acquainted with the Social Economic Review.
In 2022, yeah?
Okay? So Madam President, when we come to this House and we debate, we don't come here to mislead the public or to just win a debate. We come here with the facts, Madam President, and we don't pretend that we know. So, Madam President, when you've got such significant increases in electricity bill, you have people that can barely get by with the pile of bills that they face on a daily basis. And now this requires them to come up with the upfront cost of $40,000. That is a significant sum, Madam President. The system comes up with solar panels, the inverter, you need battery storage as well in order for this to work. You make an application to the government entity, then Lucia will have to approve your installation. A person then, as my colleague stated, can generate up to 5 kilowatts. So this in itself limits your capacity to get your money back. Not to mention, Madam President, I didn't mention and I failed to mention, if you're going to borrow this money, the financing cost. What about the interest rates that you need to go to and borrow the bank? Unless you're a very rich individual, $40,000 is a lot for you to put up upfront out of pocket. So you're going to go and borrow this money, and then you've got to pay interest to the bank. God knows what the interest rate will be. So that in itself is not as generous as the senator may have made it out to be. That if, for example, you had made this investment of $40,000, and because you get this deductible of VAT, that you're necessarily going to save it. I know of individuals who have not gone to do this even though they can afford it, because in their own calculation, they have said, look, by going to do this, it will take me too long to recuperate my money. And people who have done this have actually said that it's going to require 7 to 10 years to them to recoup their monies when they're investing in this kind of thing. And that is because of the limitation as to how much they can generate if they're going to stay connected to the national grid. Now, investors, as my colleague rightly stated, are required to sell excess to Lucia. Now, here is the injustice in this, is that when Lucia sells you the remainder of your consumption, so let's say you have the solar on your rooftop, you are then required to pay Lucia at a rate that they decide. But when you are selling to Lucia from your solar panel generation, Lucia determines how much you're going to pay. People that I know have done this.
Madam President, on a point of order.
Yes, a point of order, Senator Shah.
The member is misleading the House. Madam President, Lucia does not decide the rates, Madam President. That is the role of the regulator.
Senator Feedy, could you clear too?
So, thank you.
I think Senator Jean has
Yeah.
put forward a correction. Do you
Yeah.
wish to comment?
Madam President, I stand corrected, but what the broader point which I want to move on to is this.
No. We don't move on, just move on. The senator has indicated that it's not the job of Lucilec to make that pricing. And are you accepting?
Yeah, I'm accepting that. Yeah,
Thank you.
That's an error on my part.
Thank you.
And so therefore, Madam President, but here is the point, that when the electricity is being sold to Lucilec, that it is sold at a much lower cost than what you are actually buying it from Lucilec. And so that is what my research has suggested. So when you sell from your generation, it is not at the market
Senator
rate.
Jean,
Point of order, Madam President.
what is your point of order, Senator?
Misleading again, Madam President. The price of buying and selling electricity at this stage is the same. There is no differential. It's netted. So if you buy electricity at $1, you sell your excess at $1 to the utility. There is no differential in the price.
Okay. Senator Fede, could you please correct your statement if it's?
So Madam President, I can't take the senator's word for it because she worked at the NERC. So if she has some supporting documents to say that the research which I have conducted is wrong, then I will stand corrected. But as for now, I have to stand by what my information has revealed.
What's the source of your information?
So what?
What's the source of your
This is from
information?
people that have implemented the solar panel on their roof. That's my source.
Senators, let's have some order. I am sorry. I don't think I want to accept this. We want some official information from an official source. And I think as a professional, we have to be more careful than that. Okay? So we're not debating yours versus Senator. But she being a member of the NUC or heading that agency, I think maybe a more credible source. So at least let us be open to receiving some information to guide us accordingly. Yes? Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. So it takes an individual a very long time to recoup these funds. Madam President, my colleague also stated that the Electricity Supplies Act of 1964 places an enormous amount of limitations on the ability of not just individuals who are generating fossil fuel, but on the entire country's ability to take a leap forward in making sure that we unleash the country's full potential in renewable energies. And so, Madam President, it then becomes incumbent on the administration to update the nation as to where exactly they are, because we have been told that everything came to a halt in 2016. And so what progress have we made in the last 2 years on this very important matter, where the government has stated that they are committed to ensuring that the island moves from the 2 or 3% that we're currently generating electricity from. So, Madam President, the obligation is on the administration to sort out to get a better deal on behalf of individuals, so that the country can make a better leap forward. Madam President, so the government must take very clear steps to address the inhibiting factors. I know that legislation was passed to amend the Electricity Supplies Act in 2016, but the senator who has said that she has spent about, since 2009, I think she said she was in the energy sector, then if it took you some 7 years just to put a piece of legislation together, to amend an existing piece of legislation, then I don't think that that's very much that you have accomplished. And so, therefore,
Senator,
I'm talking about the government.
Senator Fede,
Yes?
who are you referring to?
The government of St. Lucia. the St. Lucia Labour Party
No.
administration.
Let's clarify this. The senator indicated that she has been in the energy sector from 2009. She's not the government, she's not the party. So I think you should make a distinct difference here.
So the government of St. Lucia, when I say you, I am referring to the St. Lucia Labour Party administration.
And not the senator from 2009. Yeah. Thank you.
And not the senator.
Thank you.
So therefore, it was stated that everything came to a halt in 2016, and it was said, basically, that outside of that, in her time in the energy sector, it would have meant that if I had to listen to her statements and what she implied strongly, is that outside of that we were making tremendous progress in the energy sector. But all we have done really is we have gone ahead and we've passed a law to say before today that Lucia does not have a monopoly on generating for renewable energies. Great. Now, but Madam President, there's so much more that needs to go into this, because we're still caught in a complex situation whereby Lucia says, look, you've signed a contract. The contract comes to an end in 2046. We have spent so much money putting the infrastructure down in St. Lucia to ensure that we cause St. Lucia to be in a place where its economy and its energy sector can be advanced at a time when nobody else wanted to come to the table, or we were seen as the best to come to the table at that time. And so therefore, the country is still held back by this failure by respective governments to be able to navigate around this difficult situation for us to unleash the full potential of the energy sector. So I don't think that there's really much that a lot of governments can do, because we've had so many administrations. And if you listen to the narrative that have come out from them, is that, look, they have stated, oh, this is the year we will deal with Lucia in their campaign. We will end this monopoly. We will make sure that we bring forth a more liberated energy sector. And so nothing can happen until we are able to negotiate this opportunity, this legislative framework with Lucia, which allows them a monopoly. And that monopoly, under the existing legislation, will give them that ability until 2046. So the negotiation or the negotiating skills has therefore become paramount for respective governments to make sure that they are able to find the happy medium between Lucia's contractual obligations to be fair to the investments that they have made, but also at the same time, Madam President, to ensure that that as well we are maximizing the potential in unleashing the full potential of the energy sector. So while we fail to do this, the cost of electricity remains extremely high. The ability of private residents to invest in solar panels and to tap into the benefits of this legislation remains extremely high, in fact too high for a significant portion of the population. While we fail to do that, the country cannot go forward in terms of maximizing the opportunities that are available to it in renewable energies. And so while it is great to say that, yes, we're optimistic and we're hopeful about this piece of legislation that is brought before the House today, and because it offers enormous potential, but potential is just an empty blank word. Potential does not guarantee success. Potential does not guarantee tangible benefits to the people of St. Lucia in bringing down their electricity bills. Potential and hope and words like that does not ensure that the businesses of this country are able to reduce their energy costs, which continues to make them very uncompetitive. If you talk to the manufacturing sector and you ask them what is among their highest cost, you will see that it is energy cost. You talk to the tourism sector and it is the high cost of electricity that continues to be a stumbling block in the way of greater success, in the way of greater expansion and quicker expansion into their businesses. So this by itself will not necessarily solve the problem. Now, another situation which has developed, Madam President, out of all this, is that if you had a number of the commercial operators, so if a lot of businesses decide that, look, let's get into solar panel and let's invest in renewable energies, and we will become energy sufficient because we can afford to do it. Just imagine that scenario. And it then reduces the consumption of electricity from the national grid, for example. Just think of what the cost will be to ordinary consumers. Just think of if we didn't have large businesses that in some cases are able to get off the grid and be able to generate their own electricity and invest in sufficient solar systems. Just imagine what the cost will be to local consumers, because don't forget, Madam President, that the commercial rates are playing a significant role in helping to stabilize the rates that we have at the consumer level or the residential level. And so this legislation has raised significant questions, but what has happened is the government has to ultimately, over everything else, feel obligated that they need to strike a better deal with Lucia as it pertains to the Electricity Supplies Act of 1964. So, Madam President, again, I am not as optimistic. This alone by itself will not solve the many problems, the 30% increase that the senators on the other side did not know that occurred in the rise in our electricity bill. It will not solve that problem. And so, Madam President, what we've got to do is we need tangible and practical evidence that this is going somewhere and this will benefit the ordinary residents of the country. I thank you.
Senator Charles.
I do. Madam President, just very briefly. Actually, it was not my intention to speak on this bill. I think we had agreed that my colleagues would have taken care of it, but I just thought I wanted to clarify perhaps a few issues that I overheard with reference to this legislation. So for sure, Madam President, I have no objections to the legislation, because essentially what it is suggesting there is that if I make the investment, if I have $40,000, well, now that I am going to get a reduction in the VAT of 12.5, just a rough calculation, it means I would now have to pay $35,500 thereabout for the system. If it was 40,000, less the VAT would be about 35,000. Then I would get an allowable deduction when I file my return. And yes, Honorable Senator, I think initially you said it was 3 years. It is 3 years, not 2 years, as was corrected. It's 2023, 24, and 25. So for the next 3 years, then I can get a deduction. However, I think sometimes when we come to Parliament, whether it be the upper or the lower house, there are certain things I think sometimes perhaps transcends the politics and transcends us just standing up and supporting legislation for supporting sake, etc. And there comes a time when we have to be real with the people. There's a time and a place for everything. And to my mind, when we come to the Senate, and the few opportunities that I've been given, I try as much as possible to stand and to speak on facts, on substance. Of course, I do have to respond to certain remarks that are made and make corrections, but I try as much as possible to let the populations know this is the reality of the legislation that is being passed here. And I think that is the responsibility that we have. It is unfortunate that I sat there and I listened to my colleague. As a matter of fact, I was so surprised in some of the comments that he made with the previous legislation. Some of them were shocking. Some of them were like, oh my God, are we really going to go forward with this? And then, Madam President, it seems like we come here just to rub a stamp. And we just moved on like, okay, well, let's buy the bullet and let's just do this. And we pass a piece of legislation that we thought was draconian, and the member agreed that it was, but we agreed to it. So in this legislation, Madam President, I thought that, speaking to the ordinary St. Lucian, this does not reach and will not reach the ordinary, or maybe 95% of the population. This will not reach them. For starters, initially, of course, it's a good initiative. It's a good first step. We need to look at our carbon emissions, etc., etc., etc. But for starters, nobody has $40,000 lying around. And if you do, perhaps we need to look at the proceeds. We need to look at the previous legislation and see how you just have $40,000 lying around. But I'm saying on the assumption nobody has $40,000 lying around. So it seems to suggest that if I am to invest in a photovoltaic system to reduce my electricity costs, I will have to face a financial institution to either get a loan to purchase the system. So that's number one. So how liquid are persons, and looking at the cost of living, the daily challenges that we have. And I think a member mentioned, well, we're buying cars, etc. I mean, me personally, if you give me a choice that I have to purchase a car and I have to purchase a photovoltaic system, I will purchase the car. Why? Because of my independence, because of the fact that the car will allow me to do a lot more than just having a system on my house to reduce electricity. And that's the reality. So I'm not going to stand there and pontificate and say cars and carbon emission, etc. It is the flexibility and the independence that having a car gives you. And that is why, Madam President, you will see a lot more persons. We are judging people sometimes when they go to a financial institution, but the time they get a job, the first thing they do is buy a car. But maybe we do not even understand what it is that a car or vehicle does for somebody, and that's for another story. But we have to get a loan, right? And when I do the rough calculation, I just took my phone, and anybody can go, you can Google it, you can get a calculator online, and you calculate. And for sure, I don't know, I use the rate perhaps of a credit union, which will be 1% per annum, which per month, which would be 12% per annum. Just the regular rate if you go to the credit union. You purchase the system at $35,000. For a 4-year repayment, Madam President, do you know that you would have to pay $921? How many persons would have that type of excess cash? When you calculate your salary, you pay your rent, you pay your groceries, you pay your water bill, everything and whatever. But no, I liken it to myself. So we're talking about maybe the savings in electricity. $921 per month. I can certainly tell you no more. 90% of households, regular households, don't consume so much electricity. I consume, my electricity bill on average is between $350, $375 a month. That is my average consumption of electricity. So if I invest in this system, Madam President, which is so good, and I'm so sorry that my colleague is celebrating, I'm not too sure what there is to say. I can't celebrate, for sure. Because if I invest in this system, I make a rough calculation on $35,000, and I say to the credit union, I need a 4-year, I want to pay it back in 4 years, as my colleague has suggested. I would have to pay $921 a month, vis-a-vis my $350 that I am paying in electricity. So you would see there would still be a shortfall, Madam President, of almost $300 that I would still have to be paying. So if I save the $350 from the bank, I still have another $300 that I still have to contribute. So the savings for me, and that is the calculation that I am doing for me. So sometimes when we pass legislation, Madam President, we have to think of the ordinary person and how does it affect them or impact them, and how would they be able to benefit from it. And so this is not something for an ordinary I mean, let's look at an ordinary public servant who makes $4,000 or $5,000 a month, maybe a grade 12 or grade, they can't afford it because sometimes they have a mortgage already, they have the car payment, they have the 2 children to send to school, they have the water, they have electricity, they have their other stuff. They can't afford another $921 to pay for a system in 4 years just because the government say, oh, on your income tax return, you can claim the full amount on your return. It doesn't work that way. All right? It doesn't work that way. So sometimes when we stand up there, we think it is said that we just criticize for criticizing's sake. It's not that, Madam President. Obviously, the government side will never stand in this house and say, well, let me not say never, because I did see my colleague initially, leader of government business, say that in the previous legislation he had his concerns, but in most instances they will not stand up and say to you, these are the concerns and these are the issues with the legislation, however this is why we're doing it. They stand up and they glorify it and they celebrate and tell you everything is well and yes, it's for the people, we're doing this for the people, when the reality is it's not really for the people. It's just for a very, very marginal few. And so let's call this thing what it is. Let us call a spade a spade. The legislation is good. It is a good initiative. And if those who can afford it, who can go to the financial institution, take a loan, because it's now $40,000, you get a VAT reduction, it's now $45,000, so you do get a reduction there. You take a loan if you can afford it, you can, and there may be, but it is not for the majority of the people. And that is what we have to acknowledge when we stand there. Let us speak truth to the people. Let us speak reality to the people. Let us tell the people what it is and let them decide whether this is something that they wish to participate in or not. But let's not sugarcoat it, dress it, put makeup and lipstick and give all the niceties of it, but we're not also going to give them what the disadvantages are. That's our responsibility. So, Madam President, again, as I said, this is good, but it's not for the majority. A lot of people would not be able to participate. A lot of people will not be able to benefit. It's not easy. Things are hard in this country, and I don't know that anybody has an extra $921 lying around to take a loan to buy the system to be able to afford it. So this is my contribution to this debate, Madam President. Thank you very much.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to all our colleagues who contributed to this bill, including all 3 of our opposition senators. A different tone, but I think essentially same song. Madam President, first of all, let me just reiterate what this bill before us is, for the benefit of anyone who may be a neutral listener or maybe just tuned in and paying attention to this. This is an income tax amendment bill, and it is a piece of legislation that is intended to incentivize what we can refer to the use of alternative energy. In a nutshell, that is what it is. A piece of legislation that we are coming here to pass that will basically incentivize the use of alternative energy, in that case, photovoltaic systems. That's all it is. Now, I don't know how an opposition can be as creative to be able to find something to say to oppose or to denounce something that any government anywhere in the world is going to do to incentivize the use of alternative energy, whether it's by a few, whether it's by 1% of the population, whether it's by the business sector, whether it's by the households, whether it's by a service provider like Lucia. Anywhere you go in the world today, Madam President, climate change and renewable energy and alternative energy is probably, if not number one, number two on any government's agenda. It is a reality that we face. I see them parking. We're not quite done. And I'm on my feet. Apparently, Madam President, the opposition is not interested in the response. I feel a little, I sat there and listened politely and carefully to everybody, and now I'm responding and I see everybody's head down. Yeah, it's distracting, Madam President. You know, I'm a teacher, so I pick up those things very quickly. Anyhow, Madam President, this is the way the world is going. Renewable energy, sustainable energy, climate change resilience. We have millions and millions of dollars being put aside by international organizations to fund climate resilient projects and renewable energy technologies in countries all over the world. Madam President, I remember even in the cruise sector, and we have a former Minister for Tourism here, I think he will appreciate that. The tourism sector, especially the cruise sector, they are now incentivizing, and I'm referring to the CLIA, the Cruise Lines in International Association. They are incentivizing destinations where there is any evidence of this method or this type of approach towards the shipbuilding or cruise lines that are now energy efficient in an effort to achieve what they call a net zero energy level by 2050. So every single sector is jumping on board this energy efficient approach. This is what we're doing. And no one has come here and say that this initiative, every single one of 180,000 St. Lucians or thereabout, is going to immediately benefit from that. Obviously, some will benefit more than others from the onset. And that's an argument that is fair. But I just don't understand why there is not enough discussion, for example, on developing a culture in our country where we, even at the school level, encourage our citizens to engage in practices that help to conserve or be more efficient in energy use. To be able to, for example, in our science fairs and our schools, our competitions, incentivize projects and initiatives where students, schools, and private citizens can demonstrate some kind of awareness and some kind of regard for green energy. That's the kind of conversation we need to be having here. Not about who is it for and trying to get all kinds of sauces, hot sauce, pepper sauce, and to try to make a point about how much you charge in Lucia increase. You know, that is not the kind of conversation I expect to be taking place in a Senate where legislators are talking about alternative energy. This is not a discussion that should be politicized. This is a discussion about the way we manage our climate, our energy use, and the way we regulate what we do to mitigate against the wastage and the efficient and the use of energy. So, Madam President, there was a lot of discussion that came on there, and I thought it was a little unfortunate. However, one of the things that stood out for me was the mention by Senator Stanislaus about the use of wind turbines on the East Coast. I think I heard him say that, and I noted it. I think it's a good observation that the East Coast being on the Atlantic side, there is more likely to be greater potential to harvest wind energy. But, Madam President, wasn't Senator Stanislaus in a cabinet where the Minister for Sustainable Development, who lives and is from the East Coast, basically abandoned that particular project that we could have today been harvesting the benefits of? And if the word abundant is not a good enough word, all I can say is when we left the metered office in 2016, there was quite a lot of work that was done, and we heard nothing more about it thereafter. And it is the duty of perhaps the opposition to have explained that. So I welcome the idea of the wind harvesting on the East Coast. I am from the southeast coast of this country, and I welcome that initiative. I think it's a good one. But do not use it now as if it's something we should have done when it was abundant, quote unquote. Madam President, I think that instead of arguing about things like the cost of gas increasing, which is erroneous, instead of arguing about some of the prices and all of those things that were being attempted, I think we need to start looking in the direction of how, as a country, we can encourage and educate our population on the use of alternative energy. Not only solar energy, as in what this amendment speaks to, but wind and geothermal energy. And I say geothermal because my good friend Senator Stanislaus is from Sulphur City, where we have the drive-in volcano, which has a potential, and somebody here said they don't like the word potential, I don't know, which has the potential for us to be able to generate geothermal energy, and again as an alternative source that can cut down on our use of the traditional method or the traditional type that Lucia offers. So I don't think it's a good idea to come here and try and bash Lucia when we know that Lucia, to all their credit, is one of the more efficient service providers in the region. When we have had natural disasters, they're usually the first to put everything back in place. And it's not fair for us to use this platform to go after, a reputable service provider and try to accuse them of having raised electricity prices in as many opportunities as the senator had, even when the government senator here, Senator Jean, who is part of a board that is directly responsible for that, made that known several times. The opposition senator insisted, and he said it before, he has said it in previous debates, that the cost of electricity is going up by 30%, and he looks for the social and economic review as usual. That failed him again. Up to now, he can't provide it, Madam President. He can't provide it. He provided a statement, but it does not reflect what he said. So, Madam President, I want to move finally to the point made by Senator Charles, who stated that, in an analogy to, again, hit on the idea of this initiative not being for the average St. Lucian. That's the newfound love for the average St. Lucian. That if you had an option to buy a car or to purchase a photovoltaic system, you would buy a car. I totally respect the senator's choice. That's her choice, and that's her prerogative. But I would say to the young man who is probably looking to invest, build his home and organize himself for his future, that if you had an opportunity over a long-term period, it would be in your interest to invest in something like that will save you over time, because all a car does is it becomes a liability as soon as you buy it. And maintaining it is going to put a lot of pressure on your pocket. But this is not a discussion about economics of vehicles and so on. But I respect her opinion on that and the special mathematics that was done in that regard. Madam President, let me wrap up by reiterating that the purpose of this piece of legislation, this amendment, was really to make it more affordable for persons who are desirous of joining the movement towards making the better use of our alternative energy and cutting on the cost of providing energy and using energy. This piece of legislation, as progressive as it can be, is in line with what the international community is doing, is in line with what we are expected to do to achieve our sustainable development goals. I think St. Lucia is in line with the rest of the world with that piece of legislation. I think the region would be proud of all the countries who have embarked on that type of legislation. And what I see it doing is that those who participate in it, whether they are businesses, whether they are St. Lucians who have the means, whether they are those who are going to go for a loan, those who find it fit to do so will enjoy the benefits of that investment, and it will ultimately contribute to our sustainable development agenda. So, Madam President, for this reason, I support, endorse, and encourage that type of movement and put it to this Honorable Senate for its approval. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Income Tax Act, Cap 15.02.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 38.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 44.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Insertion of new Section 59C.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Income Tax Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Income Tax Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Income Tax Amendment Act 2023.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do stand adjourned, sine die.
getting there. Senators, the question is that the Senate do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
Eh bien, nous venons au bout de session à Sénat aujourd'hui. C'est une session qui était très intéressante pour Sénat. C'est pas souvent il y a une discussion autant longue. Aujourd'hui, il a discuté trois motions avec trois billes. Si peut-être, ma sœur observe, c'est celle en discussion, il n'y a pas de chance à ces affaires des Nations Unies seulement. Mais toutes les autres, étaient dans chaque discussion, ni façade gouvernement et puis façade opposition et aussi c'est sénateur qui est indépendant. Mais c'était intéressant avec
Yes, Michael. A very interesting afternoon session of the Senate where the three bills that were up for discussion were ratified and passed. The United Nations Sanctions Amendment Bill, which had basically to do with the island's obligations to international agencies. The Proceeds of Crime Amendment Bill, this one generated a lot of discussion on both sides of the aisle, and this bill had to do with forfeiture of property from the proceeds of crime, and there was a lot of discussion. Noteworthy was the contribution made by the independent senator Mr. Lee, and he brought up the issue of having hearsay as part of or admissible in one's case against another. We saw in the lower house on Tuesday the Prime Minister had the same reservation, and of course what the members acknowledged on both sides of the house was that small island states again are being strangled, are being put under tremendous pressure. It's almost like a stranglehold is being placed upon them to meet international regulations. And of course the final bill was the income tax amendment, which basically is a bill to incentivize people in the use of solar panels and solar energy.
Eh bien, nous avons dit merci un peu. Quand nous avons préparé pour finir, c'est deux fois nous avons semaine passée, effectivement, c'est la session finie. Nous avons ça c'est sénateur pour moi, ça c'est sénateur Nancy Charles aller à l'autre façade pour engager et discussion qui continue.
Continues.
Mais intéressant pour manière yo continuer. Eh bien, c'est comme ça nous avons fini la session aujourd'hui en Sénat là. En nom Virgil Leonti, Monsieur Josiah Alexander, et puis Roger Lawrence, et puis Charlie, et puis tous ces autres travailleurs qui travaillent plus bonheur aujourd'hui. Nous avons dit merci un peu, et puis nous avons retourné au studio nous NTN.